Galveston, Texas. Right now, it's a beautiful coastal city. Beach resorts, hotels, tourists, a place people go for vacation. But on the morning of September 9th, 1900, this island looked like the end of the world. Debris as far as the eye could see. A 15-foot wall of water had swallowed everything. Streets, homes, churches, schools, all gone. Between 8,000 and 12,000 people died in a single night. In one city, in one storm. It remains to this day the deadliest natural disaster in American history. More people died in Galveston that night than in Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Harvey, and Hurricane Sandy combined, and most Americans have never heard of it. This is the story of the Great Galveston Hurricane of 1900, the disaster that America forgot. To understand what was lost that night, you first have to understand what Galveston was. Because in 1900, Galveston was not just any city. It was the crown jewel of Texas. Galveston sat on a barrier island to 30 miles long, 2 miles wide, off the Texas coast in the Gulf of Mexico. And in 1900, it was one of the wealthiest cities in the entire United States. Galveston in 1900, by the numbers 37,000 residents, a fourth largest city in Texas, third busiest commercial port in America, highest per capita income in Texas. First city in Texas with telephone plus electricity, had an opera house plus medical college, the Wall Street of the Southwest. Galveston was the commercial heart of Texas. Cotton from across the state flowed through its port. Businessmen from New York and London had offices here. The city was rich, modern, and confident. It had survived storms before, small ones, minor flooding, nothing serious. And that confidence, that complacency, would become the city's greatest vulnerability, because on August 27, 1900, a tropical storm began forming in the Atlantic Ocean, slowly, quietly, building strength over warm water as it moved west. By September 4th, 4 days before disaster, the storm had been spotted moving north from Cuba. The U.S. Weather Bureau knew something was coming. What they couldn't know, was how big it would get, or how fast. Default text: Isaac Klein was the head of the Weather Bureau in Galveston. 9 years earlier, in 1891, he had written an article in the local newspaper. In it, he stated that it would be, quote, impossible for a hurricane of significant strength to strike Galveston Island. 9 years later, on the morning of September 8th, he would be proven catastrophically wrong. Saturday, September 8th, 1900, the morning began normally. People prepared for a regular work week. Children played on beaches. Vacationers waited in the Gulf. Yes, people were swimming in the ocean on the day the storm hit. By mid-morning, Isaac Klein noticed something wrong. The tides were rising faster than normal. The waves were larger. The barometric pressure was falling. He began riding up and down the beach on horseback, warning people to move inland. Most of them laughed at him. They had seen high tides before. They had seen big waves before. Galveston always survived. Why would this time be different? Besides, the day was actually kind of exciting. The crashing waves, the wind picking up, children were thrilled. By noon, the water was already ankle-deep in the streets near the beach. By 2 p.m., waist-deep in some areas. By 4 p.m., the bridges connecting Galveston Island to the mainland had been destroyed by the rising storm surge. The city was cut off. There was no way out. The highest point in Galveston was only 8.7 feet above sea level. The storm surge reached 15.7 feet. Think about that. The entire city was below the waterline before the worst of the storm even arrived. There was literally nowhere to go. People climbed to upper floors, onto rooftops, into trees, clinging to anything that stayed above the water. At 7:30 p.m., the full force of the hurricane hit Galveston. 140-mile-per-hour winds, a 15-foot wall of water, in the darkness, with no warning system, no emergency services. No way to call for help, just the sound of the storm and the screaming. Survivors later described the sound as unlike anything they had ever heard. Not just wind, a roaring, grinding, crushing sound as 7,000 buildings were torn apart simultaneously. Entire neighborhoods gone in minutes. People who had been inside strong brick buildings found those buildings collapsing around them. By 10 p.m. it was quiet. The storm had passed, but what it left behind was almost impossible to comprehend. September 9, 1900, dawn broke over Galveston, and what survivors saw when the sun rose, those who could still see, was a city that no longer existed. 7,000 buildings destroyed, 3,636 homes gone. Every single structure on the island had suffered damage. The famous Victorian mansions, the elegant hotels, the churches, the schools. All of it, and matchsticks in the mud. And the bodies. They were everywhere, in the debris, in the water, in what remained of the streets. The death toll, between 8,000 and 12,000 people, was so enormous that the city had no way to bury them all. Bodies had to be loaded onto barges and taken out to sea. There were simply too many to bury on land, but many washed back ashore. Eventually, the city made the decision that no one wanted to make. They would have to burn the bodies on the beach in massive pyres. Clara Barton, the 78-year-old founder of the American Red Cross, came to Galveston personally to lead relief efforts. It was one of the largest disaster response operations in American history. Food, water, medicine, shelter, all had to be brought in by boat because the bridges were gone. Survivors described walking on piles of debris and realizing the debris was not just wood and brick. It was the remains of their neighbors, people they had known their entire lives. The city had lost 20% of its population in a single night. One survivor, a young woman named Daisy Thorne, wrote in her diary, "I cannot describe what I saw. There are no words. Only those who were there will ever truly know." Her diary survived. Most of the people she mentions in it did not. The question now was, what do you do after something like this? Most people expected Galveston to be abandoned, written off, left to the sea. And that is exactly what some people were saying. In part 2, we will tell you what the people of Galveston actually did. Because what they did next is one of the most extraordinary stories of defiance in American history. They didn't leave. They didn't surrender. They looked at 7,000 destroyed buildings. They looked at 8,000 graves. They looked at an island that had been swallowed by the sea. And they said, "We are going to build a wall. And then we are going to raise the entire island with our own hands." Part 2 coming soon. Subscribe now so you don't miss it.